is this broader question on what are you trying to achieve in the first place, right? And this I've particularly, to be honest, seen in Singapore. And maybe this is the nature of how what happens when you have a very competent government. I've run many programs with NCSS, and one of the things I was struck with is most nonprofits seem to see themselves just as service providers, right? As essentially the way, in IT, there are IT outsourcing. So this was like impact outsourcing. The government has decided this is what needs to be done. Here's a tender for services that need to be provided. And, many of the social sector organizations are saying, okay, so we'll provide this. So, I'm giving an example sort of to draw parallels here with the journey of Miriam's Kitchen, which is a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. And their mindset for the longest time was, we are in the business of providing, home cooked good quality food in an atmosphere of dignity to homeless people, right? And they were really well respected for that. But at some point, they started asking, but what are we achieving, right? We are not solving any problem. We are just providing good food to homeless people, and they're happy the day they come, and the next day, exactly the same problem is there, right? And so we are going to now switch our mindset to, we are actually going to start working on the homelessness problem. We will still do what we are doing, but we are doing it with a different mindset. When these people come in the door and start asking us, we engage them in a conversation while providing them food, saying, okay, why are you homeless? How can we solve you? What do you know? What kind of programs are there? And some of these we can provide, some of our partners can provide. So, they got into this much more complex conversation, which required much more collaboration across organizations, because organizations across Washington, D.C. then actually set up a common IT backbone to track all the thousands of homeless people in Washington, D.C. with very clear goals on how to get these people, in the process of serving them like they were serving before, get them to the next level where at some point they can stop coming here because they've gone to other programs, and that, that has helped them, solve the problem. And the endgame conversation that I've had with Karthik many times is around your inclusive preschool, right? And Karthik, in some sense, he's been a guest speaker in many of my classes, and he comes and he shares with us that his endgame is not about being the service provider for all preschools, or not keep opening necessarily more and more of these preschools and having the other preschools shut down, but about being a role model so that what is being done at AWWA actually becomes something that's an inspiration for other preschools and for the governments, right? And so that's why, when we use the vocabulary of endgame, the question being asked is, imagine 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what do you expect to happen because of what you're doing? Right? And yes, it could be one of the different possibilities is you're just scaling up like crazy and you're continuing your sustained service. And, all preschools in Singapore are run by AWWA, which is now providing this inclusive model. But that's not the only way. And I don't think that's what Karthik is intending, right? So there are many other end games, which are, can I be a role model for commercial adoption? What that means is, will others see this as a business case? Or for government adoption, the government saying, this is not so bad in terms of, it's quite cost effective and it helps us deliver our goals. So we will roll it out in all our preschools. Or replication is like, helping others more actively repeat their programs. Open source is saying, we'll just make all our knowledge available. It's all on our website. This is how we do it. If you want, anybody else wants to come do it and contribute to their learnings to it, they're welcome. And sort of mission achievement is, of course, a special case of endgame. It's a problem solved. If the problem is solved, then we shut down our nonprofits and change its mission to work on the next problem that we have. Karthik, did you want to comment a bit on perhaps your end game, and then we can take any questions from this or anything else that you heard?
Thanks, Jasjit. I was about to ask you when you said impact outsourcing. I was about to ask you, what do you think about AWWA? We are slightly different, right? What do you think about AWWA? Are we are we also? You think that we are a outsourced vendor?
No, I don't. I think that's where one difference is, and that's why I have very high regard for AWWA. And we've had this conversation many times, right? And the preschool example is exactly that. I think I would say the best organizations, and I think AWWA is an example of that. It's not like you wouldn't tap into the government funds, right? The point is, yes, we tap into the government funds to pay the bills, but the government hasn't told you to not think of anything else. You're able to pay the bills, you pay the salaries, and with the same money, if at the same point you're able to try additional things, try additional experiments, and then go back to the government and saying, yeah, great, we provided the services that you asked us to do. And by the way, in the process, we tried these extra things, and this is what we learned. Would you now take that back into your future planning? And, can we sort of build it a little bit more into the system? To me, that's how I see your role, which is, I think, exactly the right role. I don't think the role is sort of not to refuse the money that's coming in, as long as the money is not a distraction for your mission. Of course, if the money is such that it just says you do A today, B today, tomorrow C, day after tomorrow, so that in a way that you have no coherent mission, I think in that point, one can argue that even though it's hard, you should probably be refusing the money if you're really serious about long-term mission.
This is exactly what is AWWA's ethos is. And when I joined AWWA many years back, this was very distinct in AWWA. And that's something, actually, many of us here, we are here in this organization is because we can do what we can do, but well within that boundaries. And that is a unique model. And we want to keep that going. I actually had a long chat with Cash in HBS. He's one of the author of the Arvind model. So he was the board member working with Dr. V. And he narrated the story. They were in one of the meeting, and there was World Bank offering a lot of money to Dr. V and asking him to go into dealing with blindness. And Dr. V immediately said that, no, I am not taking your millions of dollars. And Cash said he was actually kicking the feet under the table, saying that, no, you should take the money. But then only after a few days, he realized how clear Dr. V is in his mind that I am here to deal with cataract, and I'm not going to get distracted with millions of dollars. So when the funders come and tell you, I'm going to give you this money, you take it and then deal with the problem that I want to solve, which may not be aligned with the organization's mission. We face this all the time. As leaders, we always face this when the funder comes and says that I'm going to give you this. Actually, even sometimes government, when they come and give us the money to say that I want to pilot this project, you have to go and try this. Tempted to, but you have to resist the temptation and then say no, right? And this is the maturity that as you grow in the organization, you will get. The other observation is the intentionality spectrum that you talked about. The intentions are good, but then the unintended consequences that it creates, we face that all the time when we have CSR activities. But you got to balance this act, right? So that's the art and science of really balancing all these things and then still get and do what you want to do. So those are my observations.
Yeah, I completely agree. The CSR point is very important, and this is something that I push very hard with any business leaders that I talk to, which is, in a way, the CSR funding is the worst funding because they have the money, but they don't have the sophistication most of the times. Either they don't have enough sophistication on impact, or even worse, they don't have the incentives. They're just looking for a few pretty pictures and nice stories to be able to tell. And they say, oh, the picture will look so much better if you were in location X versus Y, or you were doing activity X versus Y, rather than really understanding what is the most effective use of a certain amount of money for a certain organization's work.
The other challenge we face is this. When you talk to foundations and big donors, the word impact is not fully understood. And then everyone wants to see impact. And then when you produce an output, and tell them that, look, I can only give output for this particular program. They don't agree. No, where is the impact? And the example I always give them is, you attend a training, and at the end of the training, they send you a survey and ask you the impact of the training. I can only tell you that I have learned this right today. I'll have to go back and apply, and I can only tell you the impact after 3 months, whether the knowledge that I've gained from here is impactful or not. That's exactly what some of our funders expect. I give you money today, tomorrow I want to see impact. But the nature of the service, I can only measure the outputs.
Yeah.
And we face this all the time, the difference between outputs, outcomes, and impacts. In fact, I tell my colleagues that let's just focus on outputs and outcomes, max. Outcomes, that's good enough. Impact is sometimes very, very hard, and we can't do RCTs here. We don't have the money, we don't have the time. And I think that clarity is also very, very important. Yeah. One thing that I learned over many years from you, from all the colleagues, and from impact community, is a difference between these things: outputs, outcomes, and impacts. What should we focus on? No need to get carried away with those terminologies. Also, the ESG part, because now ESG is a big funding. All the stock exchanges are asking for ESG check mark, and people come and say, I want to pay you this, but I only want to do this. Sometimes it's a distraction. AWWA is actually in the left-hand side of the spectrum, but moving away from pure welfare charity towards the right hand. But I want to keep it slightly in the middle and slightly oriented to the left side.
Which makes sense.
Not to the right, not extreme to the left. We started off as the left-hand side, where we were a welfare and a pure charity. We have some more time, maybe 5 more minutes, 5-10 more minutes we can take. I want to ask my colleagues to define their end games, because Jasjit, I came back from ISEP and I introduced this end game model in AWWA, and every single service in AWWA can define the end game. There are a couple of people I'm seeing here. I can ask Sairam, Mahesh, maybe even Amy, Ruby. You can define your end game, because we really have different end games for different programs. Our website that we recently launched, include.sg, is a resource center. Jasjit, I want that like a Wikipedia, like a open source. We're not there yet, but that's an open source end game. Kindle Garden has multiple end games: government adoption, but we also want replication is something I don't know whether we can do it at the moment, but primarily government adoption and the sector adoption. Some services we are just scaling it and going deeper, right? So we really, what gave us clarity is really the beauty of defining this end game. The moment you define your end game, everything falls in place. Your activities, your resources, clarity in explaining to your stakeholders. We are really lucky to have Jasjit today. He taught me this end game model. Okay, he gave me this article from Stanford Innovation Review, and when I read it, it made a lot of sense, and that's why I made that as one of the strategy tool in AWWA. We define the end game, we define our theory of change, and then we define our activities, eliminate all the activities. The blue version is actually also from INSEAD. Okay, it's a very, very famous tool, right? And we use blue ocean. We use strategic canvas to eliminate unnecessary activities, which is not creating an impact. And then from there, we define our activities. Then we go into our budget. Those days, we just go straight to the budget. Nowadays, we don't. We define our end game. We define our theory of change. We eliminate unnecessary activities. And then we plan our resources and then go to the budget. So it makes a lot of sense, right? And that's the beauty. I should thank Jasjit for all these things. Okay, he's the one who actually kind of helped me think through some of those things.
Thank you so much, Karthik. It has been a pleasure. I have also learned a lot from you over the years. So really appreciate it.